Greetings from Tokyo. This is Daisuke Beppu, and I hope all of you are doing really well today. Again, I have to beg your pardon, but if you don't mind, I would like very much to show you some of my favorite titles from the Criterion Collection Laserdiscs. So as some of you may know, I am a huge fan of the Criterion Collection. I think it's a really fantastic label. And as part of that admiration, I am also a really big fan and collector of the Criterion Collection Laserdiscs. I believe that it's a real fun hobby to collect these Laserdiscs, and some of the titles are actually extremely interesting. What I'd like to do is I'd like to show you 10 of my favorites from the Criterion Collection Laserdiscs that are not currently on a Criterion Collection DVD or Blu-ray. So these are titles that are only on a Criterion Collection Laserdisc. Of course, you might be able to find the titles on a different label, and yes, I think for all of them you would be able to find them on a different label. But as far as the Criterion Collection goes, these titles are not on Criterion Collection DVD or Blu-ray. They are only on Laserdisc, at least as of the moment of this video, which is July 3rd, 2018. Without further ado, let me show you some of my favorites from the Laserdisc collection. Akira. So this is the famous Japanese animation film written and directed by Katsuhiro Otomo. There are two releases of this film actually by Criterion on Laserdisc. So there's this, which is the CAV spine number 151, and there's also this one, which is the CLV release, spine number 283. There you go. So I'm privileged enough to have both of these. The film Akira is an absolute masterpiece. It is a key seminal work in Japanese animation. It is certainly one of the most important anime films with respect to the exposure of anime to the West. I think every kid who is a fan of anime now will have watched Akira at least once in his or her life. The characters are very complex and relatable, and we are talking about basically a bunch of characters that are from different factions of society. You have some characters that are from the military, some that are from a kind of a resistance, some that are in the biker gang culture. And it is with this really complex science fiction plot about telepathy and the grittiness of futuristic Tokyo that we have the characters from these various factions colliding in a really fantastic and outstanding way. The set pieces that are in this film are some of the most violent and stunning that I have ever seen in an anime film. It just blows your mind. You know, those first few moments where you don't quite know what's going on, and then bam, we get those wonderful shots of the nighttime skyline of Neo Tokyo, and then you have shots of these biker gangs fighting, and then suddenly we are thrust into some kind of resistance and police brutality and extreme violence and military, and then you throw into that the whole thing with the telepathic kids and Tetsuo and Kaneda and their struggles, their friendships, which is a very complicated friendship, probably one of the more complicated male friendships in modern cinema. Wonderful film, Akira. This is one that really everyone should know and should watch at least once. If there's one anime film that you should see, it's definitely Akira, in my humble opinion. Anyway, there you go. Alfred Hitchcock's North by Northwest. This is a very famous film. It probably needs no further introduction from me. And I can certainly add nothing more which has not already been said about this wonderful film. This is a wonderful presentation from the Criterion Collection Laserdiscs, and this happens to be the CAV box. I also happen to have the CLV release here. As you can see, there is a slightly different cover design. This is probably the most fun of the Hitchcock films that are on the Criterion Collection Laserdisc slate, as it were. There are other films in the slate, for example, Blackmail, Young and Innocent, Sabotage, The Secret Agent, Rebecca. I think that's it for the Laserdiscs, and then North by Northwest. If I'm forgetting one, I apologize. Oh, Notorious, excuse me. Yes, of course, Notorious. And there are Alfred Hitchcock films that are in the current DVD collection, such as Rebecca, Notorious, Spellbound, The Lodger, etc., etc. North by Northwest, unfortunately, has not been released on a regular Criterion DVD or Blu-ray, but it should, because this is the seminal, how should I put it, Alfred Hitchcock Man on the Run film. This is the one which has all the great Alfred Hitchcock tropes: the man on the run, mistaken identity, the MacGuffin. The MacGuffin is really great in this, by the way. You've got the unknown man or woman, the specter, the character that does or does not exist. You've got great interplay with lamps and hotel rooms. Of course, you've got the cool blonde and the cool, handsome leading man. And you've got impeccably dressed characters and suave villains, etc., etc., and topped off with the wonderful score by Bernard Herrmann. It has everything that you want in an escapist, fun Alfred Hitchcock classic thriller, and then some. North by Northwest is a gem. If you haven't seen it already, what are you waiting for? You really should. Now, this, of course, is available on Blu-ray elsewhere outside of the Criterion Collection, I'm sure. In fact, I think I own it on Blu-ray. Yes, I do. I think it's from the Universal set, if I'm not mistaken. So, yes, but I really love this Criterion Collection Laserdisc. There's something very charming about the presentation of this. Anyway, here's hoping one day that Criterion might seek to upgrade this title to the current Blu-ray or DVD lineup. North by Northwest, one of Hitchcock's best. Ghostbusters. So this is spine number 75. Yes, this is a classic American horror comedy from the 1980s. It's a pretty big fan favorite, I should say, because it's a huge blockbuster hit, and it's very funny and witty, and it has some great scenes and a great cast led by Bill Murray and Dan Aykroyd and Harold Ramis and Ernie Hudson, of course. And Rick Moranis, I should say. Rick Moranis is probably one of the funniest character actors I've ever seen. But this is just one of those special magical combinations of witty comedy, nonchalance, action, horror, great special effects, and a creepy score, a wonderful story, tight construction, and just brilliant execution from start to finish. I remember seeing this as a kid, and I blew the socks off, as it were. It just scared the heck out of me, and I loved it, and I wanted to see more and more. So having this Laserdisc is a real treat for me, because it enables me to revisit the wonderful scenes from this fantastic film. Of course, this is available on Blu-ray, I'm sure, but the Criterion Laserdisc is really wonderful. This is a nice reminder that back in the day, Criterion did release quote-unquote, mainstream blockbuster films, not just The Rock and Armageddon, but also films like Ghostbusters and some others. And it really should try to get the rights to these films, because Criterion could really do a great job with the technology and the resources that it has today, and release a stellar Blu-ray of Ghostbusters. Could you imagine? That would be so wonderful. But until that glorious day comes, we still have the very glorious Laserdisc of Ghostbusters. 247, John Carpenter's Halloween. I love horror films. I love slasher films. So, the best, greatest, most historically significant slasher horror film is Halloween, bar none. The fact that Criterion released this on Laserdisc is such a wonderful piece of Laserdisc history and Criterion history. This is a historic film, I think. It is historic in the sense that it was a pioneering film in terms of independent American cinema. It is an important film in terms of the establishment of certain tropes and stereotypes that carried through many years afterwards, and formed a very seminal and important bedrock of American independent cinema, at least from the late 1970s into the 80s, that's for sure. And you've got the wonderful performances, of course, Jamie Lee Curtis, of course, Donald Pleasance, of course, the John Carpenter music, of course, the wonderful set piece at the beginning with the long take, and of course, the iconic serial killer, Michael Myers. If Criterion were to release this on Blu-ray, man, I'd just be jumping up and down for joy, that's for sure. This would be a great bestseller in the Criterion collection, I'm sure, because there would be a lot of crossover between people who are into, let's say, quote-unquote art house cinema, and people who are into grindhouse horror and more conventional horror. It fills in all of these gaps really nicely. Don't know if it'll ever happen, but fingers crossed. Halloween. Yes, the Criterion Collection Laserdisc is a real gem. Spine number 131. From Russia with Love. Now, the Criterion Collection released 3 films from the James Bond series that was produced and distributed by Eon and United Artists and MGM. So the quote-unquote official Bond films. So those 3 titles are Dr. No, From Russia with Love, and Goldfinger. Now, for reasons that I don't want to get into too much now, there were there was a bit of a troubled history between the licensors of these films and Criterion with respect to these releases. And so it is very likely that these films, the James Bond films, will probably never see a Criterion release in the future. Who knows? I mean, things can change. It's always up to the licensors to be able to agree to license out the rights to make and distribute Blu-rays under the Criterion Collection label. Who knows? Things, rarer things have been known to occur, I'm sure. But this is all a very bloated way for me to say that I highly doubt that this film will ever become a Criterion Collection Blu-ray. Doesn't matter, because the films are readily available on Blu-ray elsewhere, and also we still have the ability to get these Laserdiscs. And also, yes, yes, I think, I guess yes, those two reasons, I think. And the film is a classic. This is probably in my top 2 or 3 favorite Bond films of all time. Sean Connery's second outing as 007, he never looked better, in my opinion. He is just rugged and suave, and he looks comfortable and confident in the role. It was a confidence that he was probably a bit lacking in Dr. No, the previous outing. The plot is mysterious and very Cold War-esque. I love the interplay between the quote-unquote heroes and the quote-unquote villains, and there's a bit of a gray area that's generated, because there is the bigger fish, as it were, in the form of the great villain enterprise of Spectre. You've got great villains, Rosa Klebb, Grant, right? So you've got Rosa Klebb played by the wonderfully villainous Lottie Lenya. What a wonderful performance. Watch out for those shoes, my friend. And also Red Grant, played with such terrifying, cool menace by the great Robert Shaw. Wonderful blonde hair. And then you've got wonderful set pieces and the Orient Express fight. You've got the the wonderful set piece where Bond is trying to steal the Lektor from the Russian embassy. You've got wonderful locales in Istanbul, a beautiful leading actress, Daniela Bianchi, as Tatiana Romanova. What a great name that is, huh? Tatiana Romanova. Anyway, it'll never happen. I'm 99% positive it will never happen, but again, wouldn't it be great if this were on a Criterion Blu-ray? In the meantime, we can always enjoy the Laserdiscs or any other method of watching the film. This is one of my favorite Bond films, From Russia with Love. Spy number 109, Taxi Driver. Now, for reasons that I talked about in another video that I made a few weeks back, that was directed to my very dear friend, Mr. Steve Vincent Furness, I always associate this title, Taxi Driver, with him, Mr. Furness, because he made a video some time back about him acquiring this very Criterion Collection Laserdisc title. This is, of course, the classic film directed by Martin Scorsese, starring Robert De Niro. It's a real disturbing look at the sickness, I suppose you'd say, of loneliness. Travis Bickle is one of those iconic characters, a real disturbing, sick character, of course. The wonderful thing about this film is, well, there are many wonderful things, I suppose, but for me, what sticks out is that Martin Scorsese was very experimental with his direction of this film. And you could tell because there are a lot of little tricks and editing techniques and camera swooping moves, etc., that are very unconventional for quote-unquote conventional Hollywood cinema or American cinema, as it were. On the contrary, his techniques seem to be almost akin to French New Wave cinema, which is a really interesting thing because this film almost feels like, something that maybe, I don't know, it's almost like Francois Truffaut directed Death Wish, and the result is something like Taxi Driver, except it's an American film directed by the great Martin Scorsese. Just a real quirky and creepy and odd film that is just wonderful in terms of its parts, and even more wonderful in terms of the sum of those parts, and just the climactic conclusion and the way it resolves itself, or does it resolve itself, I'm not sure, but the way it does try to resolve itself is at once exhilarating and chilling. Taxi Driver. Will this ever be released on Criterion Blu-ray? Who knows? Who knows? You know that Martin Scorsese has a good relationship with the Criterion Collection, but this is a pretty famous film, and it might not ever be released by Criterion. Although, never say never. All right, never say never. Pink Flamingos. Of course. This is spine number 341. This is the film. I remember I saw this actually in the movie theater because there was the 25th anniversary re-release of the film that occurred, and it had a theatrical release. This was back in the late 1990s, and I remember I had just turned 17, or maybe I had turned 17, and maybe it was a couple months after I had turned 17 or something like that. And this was the first film I saw in the theater that was an NC-17 rated film. And I remember feeling very proud of myself because I felt it was a bit of a rite of passage to watch an NC-17 film. And up to that point, I had never seen Pink Flamingos. So I was just sitting there in the theater, not quite knowing what to expect, right? At that time, internet was not as prevalent as it is now, so it's not like I was able to access a lot of information immediately about this film prior to actually seeing it. And I watched it. I sat there in the theater. I watched it. I was eating my popcorn and drinking my soda. By the end, I felt dirty and I felt almost sick. I wanted to throw up. And I think that was one of the greatest educational experiences of my life. I learned that cinema is not just about the conventional methods of storytelling. Cinema can be raw, cinema can be aggressive, and it can be dirty, and sometimes it should be, because it has to make you think and struggle. This film does that in spades, does it not? It is truly a remarkable film. Driven, of course, by the remarkable, legendary, just mythic, divine, as Babs Johnson. I love Divine. I love Divine because he just throws everything into his performance, does he not? He does so many crazy things in this film, and he does so many really irreverent and wonderful things in this film. But I think for me, the funniest thing that he does is it's just Divine walking, and he's walking through a sort of an African-American part of Baltimore, and it's just him walking down the sidewalk, and you could tell that this was all done for real. It wasn't a set or there weren't extras. These are all real people, and you have Divine dressed up as Babs Johnson, just walking down the street, and they're just filming from the car, and you can see all these people just walking by and stopping and staring and just with their mouth agape, like That's to me the essence of this film, Pink Flamingos. Babs Johnson, just the way that Divine throws himself and thrusts himself into this performance is really admirable and lovely. I love Divine, and this film, as disgusting as it is truly a great masterpiece. And hopefully, who knows, maybe one day it might be a Blu-ray. Fingers crossed. Pink Flamingos. It's cheating here, but I really have to mention it. It's 210, spine number 210. Again, another John Waters film, Polyester. Polyester. This is my second favorite John Waters film behind Pink Flamingos. Francine Fishpaw has got to be one of the loveliest creations of John Waters and Divine. One of the most just... She is a struggling housewife. She has all these issues with her husband and her children, and she's trying to find some kind of satisfaction in terms of her relationships and love and meaningful love, etc. And it all kind of crumbles around her. But she is resilient. She is human. She reacts in a very human way, and she is so charming and fragile and just a really sweet, sweet woman. Francine Fishpaw is just one of the most beautiful creations, I think, in the John Waters catalog. What I wouldn't give to see this film released on a Criterion Collection Blu-ray, huh? And with an Odorama card as well, wouldn't that be cool? That would be very cool indeed. So, yes, in the meantime, we have this Laserdisc. So, if you are so inclined, as the man says, come on upstairs, meet your polyester queen, Francine. Wonderful film, Polyester. Spine number 60 is 2001, A Space Odyssey. So this is a film directed by Stanley Kubrick. This is a science fiction film, and it is considered one of the greatest films ever made. Now, I think I agree with that assessment, because it is just one of those once-in-a-lifetime experiences, regardless of the fact that there's pretty much no human character that we latch on to, probably except for the astronauts in the second half of the film. What can I say about this film? It's just, you look at it and your mouth is just wide open. I mean, you're either mystified at what you're seeing. You feel like you're seeing history unfold. You feel like you're seeing real science. It's like you're seeing the moment of evolution where A evolves into B. It's that moment in between, that you're seeing, that wonderful spark of a moment. And you realize that it's something magical. And that's just the wonderful power of film and the power of the illusion that Stanley Kubrick was able to create out of thin air, as it were. It's really remarkable. To this day, I don't know if the monolith is benevolent or filled with malice, right? I'm not sure if the monolith's mission with respect to Earth was one of peace and one of helping to have the human race evolve in a peaceful way in terms of the development of technology, etc. Or was the monolith's mission a more malevolent one? In other words, introducing the concept of violence and introducing the concept of Cain and Abel, as it were, the idea of killing, and in order to promote the concept of survival, etc., etc. Or was it something in between? Was the monolith just did the monolith just happen to awaken something that was innate in human nature to begin with? I don't know. The more I think about it, the more intrigued and frightened I am, actually. I don't know what the answer is, but I do know that this is such a deep and enlightening and challenging film. Cold, barren, sometimes unrelatable on a very intimate level, but it makes up for that in terms of its spectacle. And in fact, it does become relatable when you're dealing with the idea of the instinct of wanting to survive. That is a very innate instinct that is existing in all of us, I'm sure. And so on that level, I can relate to each of the characters, including HAL 9000. I can relate to all of them very much indeed. Yes. Anyway, will this ever be a Criterion Blu-ray? Gosh, wouldn't that be great? I mean, we saw Barry Lyndon recently, and we also saw Dr. Strangelove, so who knows? Maybe 2001 is a possibility. Maybe if the Criterion Collection spine numbers reach 2001, wouldn't that be great if the 2001st spine number of the Criterion Collection is 2001? So fitting. So all we have to do, we just have to wait for 1,000 titles or so until we reach 2001. I think I can wait. Anyway, 2001, Space Odyssey. This is spine number 1 of the Criterion Laserdiscs. Citizen Kane. Now, this is a remarkable film. It's remarkable for many reasons, but if I were to distill my comments into something more concise, I would probably have to say that, yes, I would probably have to say 4 names: Orson Welles, Herman Mankiewicz, Greg Toland, and Bernard Herrmann. Those are the reasons why Citizen Kane is the masterpiece that it is. Greg Toland, of course, for the cinematography. Herman Mankiewicz, of course, for the story. Bernard Herrmann, of course, for the wonderful score. And last but certainly not least, Orson Welles for everything. I think we owe Orson Welles a great debt because he shows us in Citizen Kane just how well the idea of technical prowess of cinema can combine with such a powerful story. At its core, Citizen Kane is a powerful story about corruption, and it is so intriguing and heartbreaking to see this character of Charles Foster Kane, someone that we can sympathize with to a great extent around the beginning of the film, or at least those parts of the film that highlight his youth and his time when he was maybe in his 20s and just starting out with the newspaper business, etc. And what it does is it takes that character that we can sympathize with and all of a sudden turns him into someone that is very villainous and someone we don't sympathize with. He becomes the antagonist, as it were. And that is, to me, very intriguing. The idea of a character that we can sympathize with and we consider to be the protagonist during one part of the film, and then suddenly shifts to being a bit of an antagonist by the end of the film. That kind of dynamic within the same structure, the narrative structure, is very intriguing and incredibly difficult to pull off. Citizen Kane was one of the first films, I think, to do that very successfully. Anyway, this is a really fascinating film. Will it ever be on the Criterion Collection DVD Blu-ray slate? Don't know. I have no idea. We are approaching spine number 1000 on the DVDs and Blu-rays, are we not? So wouldn't it be fantastic if spine 1000 or spine 1001 were Citizen Kane and another film? Wouldn't it be great if one of those spine numbers was Citizen Kane? That would be just so fantastic. In a huge brick of a box. Gosh. Who knows? But this is just mere speculation on my part. In the meantime, we have the wonderful Laserdiscs from Criterion to enjoy. That's Citizen Kane. I'd like to stop there, and I'd like to thank you very much for your time. I should have mentioned this at the outset. The Laserdisc discussion that just occurred is basically just very brief comments that I made about the films themselves. I don't go into the technical aspects of the films. What I plan to do is, well, I have two things that I have planned to do with respect to the Laserdiscs. First, I plan to create a long video that shows all of the Laserdiscs that I have from the Criterion Collection. I am very proud to say that I am Criterion Collection Laserdisc complete, and so I'd like to have the opportunity to share that with you. Maybe you might get a kick out of it, I hope. That's one thing. The second thing that I plan to do is I plan to go through each of the Laserdiscs one by one, try to create a little capsule video review for each. And on that occasion, I will probably discuss, among other things, the details about the supplemental material, the technical aspects of the Laserdiscs themselves, etc., etc. So I beg your pardon and I ask for your patience going forward. If you have any questions, or if you have any comments, or you want to see any specific titles showcased, please feel free to let me know at any time. I am very happy to hear any comments. Criticisms and complaints also are welcome. I'm very happy to hear those, and I am only human, and so I know that I have room for improvement, a lot of room for improvement. So if you have any suggestions on how I can improve myself, please let me know, and I'm very happy to hear those. In the meantime, if you want to talk to me, or if you want to discuss anything with me directly, please leave a comment below, or you can find me on Facebook. You can just search for me under my name, Daisuke Beppu, and I'm in all the Criterion-themed Facebook groups, but you can also private message me, and I'm very happy to talk with you. I love talking about films. I love talking about Laserdiscs, Criterion Laserdiscs, the Criterion DVD, Blu-rays, other films that are not Criterion, of course. I love them. And more than anything else, I love to hear your recommendations and your suggestions, because hearing those enables me to broaden my own horizons and think outside of my own limitations and box. So that is probably the biggest thrill that I can get, is talking to you and hearing what you have to say about films that you love and you enjoy. And that's where great discussions can be had. Am I right? Anyway, thank you very much for your time, and please have a wonderful rest of your day, and look forward to seeing you soon. Take care.